Sarah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to join you. And congratulations to you guys for being here. Right? If there's, 21 million sellers, and there's 1,500 here, you guys made a big decision to be here, and I'm really grateful to be with you. And I'm going to take you on a quick ride around this future. We're calling it the big shift. I'll describe more why. But as you look at the future, there's this interesting quote that has been floating around for years. And it says, the future already exists, it just isn't evenly distributed. That sounds actually encouraging, right? If we can just wait for the wave to hit us, we'll be able to jump on it when it's our time. Unfortunately, that's outdated. It is happening in real time. It is happening quickly. Jet came out of nowhere, right? Jet.com. Snapchat came out of nowhere. So the question, I guess, is when you look at the road ahead, how do you possibly build a path to something that is happening in real time? That is really sort of the question that we all look at and that I get to now spend all my time with my clients and my teammates thinking about. So what we have kind of thought is, well, I can't predict the path, right? I can't give you the exact specifications of the future, but I can look at it from two different points of view. So the questions that we're going to dive in together today are this idea of what does the future need and expect from you, right? You have a pretty decent understanding of, as Sarah mentioned, the cultural, economic, and technological shifts. It gives you a bit more of a sense of what the future is asking from you. And then it gives you a chance to reflect on what you're in a unique position to create and contribute to that future. Each of us has a unique perspective, a unique vantage point, a unique empathy, unique history, unique resources, right? We can bring something unique to the future. So when you marry those two things together, you actually create opportunities that didn't exist before. Where are we now? All right, well, no big shock, right? But this is just a picture of the fact that technology is changing and information is growing and culture is shifting exponentially. This is not something that is happening slowly, and it's not happening linearly, is that the word? And the big challenge here is that as humans, it is really difficult for us to adapt at an exponential rate. You know, linear growth we can kind of handle, we can kind of predict it kind of makes sense to us, but exponential growth is actually very, very overwhelming. And it really means that we have to spend a lot of time learning to adapt, or learning coping mechanisms, or frankly, learning how to navigate. And it's not going to get any slower, right? So therein lies the reality. People are demanding more. Quality, innovation, transparency, personalization, speed, right? We could add to that list. Flexibility, connectivity. I mean, I can make that slide even longer, right? The demands continue to increase, and as people are demanding more, what are they willing to give? Less, right? Less time, less energy, less money, less complexity. That is the tension that we are facing every day, that you guys face every day. Escalating expectations in both directions. Really challenging. And as I said, it's not going to get any slower, right? There's this conversation around shifting from one economic era to another. Futurists, economists, analysts have spent a lot of time describing what that shift is, right? It could be that we're moving from an analog age to a digital age, or from a transaction age to a social age, or however you want to describe what sort of that shift is. The reality is systems are breaking down on one side and being rebuilt and recreated on the other side, and it has disrupted every organization, every industry, every person, right? You guys were part of it. eBay was part of the disruption in 1996. That's exciting, right? But it also means that it is not guaranteed that we get to stay there. So when you look at the future, we kind of have a decision, right? It can be filled with mixed feelings. I am eternally optimistic. You know, I really do believe very much in the future, but it is also with some sense of overwhelm when I think about it. You know, who do I turn to? Who do I learn from? Who do I collaborate with? There's just so much coming at me. How do I make sense? Where and how do I invest my time and my energy wisely, right, to take on new? But I also encourage you guys to look at the positive side of it, right? The opportunity to create. There are so many new possibilities, new insight, new collaborations, new business models, potentially new businesses altogether that didn't exist. We're going to talk a little bit about some of those potentially today. So there's a lot, again, as you look at it, that can go positive and negative, but it is fair to say that there has been a tremendous amount of disruption, right? Not all folks have made it through to the other side. Brand survival is not guaranteed. It's really tough when you go into an organization that has not just been around for as long as you guys have, but 125 years, right? I work with big, huge companies that have been around for over a century, and they're losing share, right? It isn't guaranteed that you get to stay in this place just because you did it, and that's not just brands. It's, you know, malls. It's publishers. It's, you know, very fundamental ways in which industries were created. But here again is the encouraging news, right? There are plenty that are thriving in this space, right? Across different sectors, across different things, they recognize the constant need for innovation. And they're built with a different set of values and principles that allow them to embrace innovation, right? They aren't afraid of it. They don't find it as risky. They find it as really something that they must build into the DNA of their organization. They also know how to pace it. There's this interesting thing that when you go too fast, right, and you don't have the culture and you don't have the infrastructure built well, you can crash really quickly. Uber is going through a tough time, right? Chipotle is going through a tough time. Those were brands I used to stick on that right side of that chart that are no longer there. So just because you made it through the gauntlet doesn't mean that you get to stay there necessarily indefinitely. You need to keep making sure that you are relevant and meeting needs in a solid and significant way. Today, I won't take you through all 10 of them, but I'm going to concentrate on 4. Hopefully they're familiar, right? These things have been around, but it's important that we have a shared understanding of those so that we can start to talk about what the implications of some of those are. I really believe that they are the key to winning the future, really, to playing big. So quickly, let's go first. This is a pretty staggering number. 35.6% is the percentage of wealth held by the top 1% of our country. In the US, 1% of the population controls 35% of the wealth. If you look at it like this, you know, if you made it a map, it would be this. The top 10% controls 75% of the wealth of the country. That is huge implications because most of our business strategies over the last several decades were built right at the accessible, growing middle class, right? We all assumed that that's what was happening and that's what we pitched most of our stuff toward, and it was very successful until it stopped, right? There was this sort of hollowing out. And when you think about who's got discretionary income, right, 10% of the country's got a lot of discretionary income, and 90% doesn't. So that 90% is also looking for solutions, right? They're moving into tinier homes. They're shopping at Aldi. They're really thinking about whether or not they need to own something at all, right? Whether or not there's a more, not just valuable way, but a more, thoughtful way in which they can use their time and money. So if you think about this, it is fundamental. Be open to wonder. Wonder and resistance can't coexist, apparently. One of the emotional physics of life. So being in a state of wonder is a really extraordinary thing. It allows you to think, well, what if, right? So you, again, will hear over the next few years some pretty radical thinking around wealth distribution. Just wonder, what if? Okay, the disruption mandate. Devin alluded to it. It's impossible to ignore the fact that technology is having a tremendous impact on our lives. Again, we all sit there and say, before 2007, just a mere 10 years ago, we did not have smartphones. We did not have apps in which we could, date and drive a car and shop and take photos and learn and on the way that we can now. I was telling someone a story yesterday that I did another talk a year ago, and I quickly texted my daughter, who was 13 at the time, and I said, honey, how many Snapchat photos have you taken? Or Snapchat messages have you sent? And I quickly get a response, 61,392, but Mom, it's been around a really long time. I'm like, oh my God, right? That's just what she sent. She's received probably twice as many. That's a lot, right, of photos and a lot of communication in a really different way. So you start to think about how much that has already had an impact on our lives. It is mind-boggling to consider this range of things and what it is that they will have an impact on, right? From artificial intelligence, robotics, drones, 3D printing, nanotechnology, virtual reality, augmented reality, the Internet of Things or Internet of Everywhere, everything, cryptocurrencies, human-machine interface. The list goes on. I actually built a conference last year in which I got to invite 21 of the leading business executives to come and talk to us about 7 of these disruptive technologies and explain to a room of business leaders what the impact would be. I stood at the front edge of this future, guys. I can tell you it's real. So how will we navigate when all these things happen? Well, let me just give you a few headlines currently, right? This isn't the future. This is what's happening now. The first is that a tiny house, I admit it's tiny, but a house was printed in 24 hours. It's not an ephemeral house. It's a house that's supposed to last about 175 years, and it costs about $10,325 to build. Just imagine, again, what is possible if we can 3D print a house for $10,000. Right? I know, I want one. Burgers are now in restaurants, and they're becoming the robot chefs. Interesting implications. There's actually a move potentially in California to tax people who hire robots instead of people, which is a a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. But we're seeing robots move into manufacturing, seeing them move into a whole bunch of things. They're getting more sophisticated every day. So is the move to autonomous vehicles, right? Not only do we get to see them in certain parts of the country driving around now, but legislation is moving more and more in that direction. You've got things like cryptocurrencies. And by the way, we're not the only ones on the planet. Other countries are investing in these technologies as well, and they're growing potentially at different rates than we are. Their appetite for adoption might be different than ours. So you take something that seemed like this really weird edge technology, and now you've got a national government that's planning, doing some testing or experimenting with something like a digital currency. And then you can go all the way to the fact that in Sweden right now you can get chipped if you work for this particular company. They stick it inside your finger and you never have to worry about whether or not you got your key card again, right? Or you can make copies on the printer or whatever it is that you need a piece of technology to do. Seems far out, but 150 people at this company have already been chipped. So I don't know that we're ready necessarily to get chipped. But as you look at the future, again, that I think is important for us to consider is the role of 3D printing, or 3D even plus printing, as printing gets smarter and smarter. This is a company called Fast Radius. They print now on demand, industrial grade manufacturing of parts or whatever the pieces are that you might need. Now what I found fascinating about Fast Radius is one of their largest investors, or prominent investors, is UPS. Now why would UPS be invested in something called Fast Radius? Well, UPS is actually experimenting with putting them into their distribution centers. So at UPS locations, there will be a way to be able to have your part or your piece printed on demand. Now, why would UPS do this? We actually had Stan Deans, the president of global distribution, at our event last year, and someone from another tech company is like, why? Like, why would you do that? Because you know what? This is what he's worried about. This is from a patent that was filed a couple of weeks ago from Amazon for their bee-like hive drone centers or distribution centers inside urban areas. They're trying to figure out how to bring it closer and closer to an urban setting so the warehouses aren't far out. This is a drone tower. This is a little person at the bottom. That's the size of scale of this. So you imagine inside a tower, there are people who are feeding drones packages all day long that can fly through the city. Is this going to happen, to Devin's point? We don't know for sure. But the fact is that they're playing with it. They're experimenting with it. They've got different models. They'll test it. So everyone's in there in the spirit, again, of disrupting and trying to figure out how to win the future. So what does this mean? It means that we have to develop a really different way of thinking about what it is that we do. I contend that my generation was taught that we are here to produce and replicate success. Here's the rule book. If you follow the rule, you'll be able to continue to replicate and scale quite quickly. That's how many brands were built around the world, right? They were consistent. They were reliable. They had the rule book. They literally had a rule book. Guidelines about how to do all that. We have now moved into an era where we're not replicators, we are navigators. Navigators require a really different set of skills, right? There's a humility involved, there's a constant learning that's involved, there's collaboration that's involved, there's agility that's involved, there's willing to test and learn. There's a whole different way in which we have to operate when we are navigators versus replicators. All right, this is one I think is really important to consider, right, that we are all connected. The fact is that we are not separated. As these technologies take root, we learn more about the impact that our decisions make, the ripple effects, the externalities is sort of the fancy word. But we see that we are actually making decisions about how things affect others. And so it starts to impact how we shop. This idea of the circular economy is about, what went into the product that it is that I'm buying, what sort of contributed to that product, and then what happens to it when I'm done with it, right? Does it just die? Does it end? Or is there a way for these resources to continue to be used? I'm excited about the fact that I bought this dress resale. Thank you very much. I know. I'm a big resale shopper. And I start to see, I love that you guys are so excited about that. Thank you for making it possible. But what I think is interesting is to see, again, how big brands are adopting it. So Eileen Fisher now has the capacity, or is inviting people to buy their clothing at resale inside their boutiques next to the new stuff. So I have a choice when I walk in of whether or not I want to buy the resale item or I want to buy the new item in their retail location. I think that's extraordinary, right? I'm not forced to go kind of shop over here versus over there. I get to make the decision in real time. Then there's a sharing economy, right, which is the idea, do I need to own it at all? Perhaps I can just have rent access to it. I can rent access to a drill, I can rent access to a car, I can rent access to a dress. I met a woman recently, she was in sales, who literally her entire wardrobe is Rent the Runway. She owns a dress for each meeting. She's never worn the same dress twice. She's that committed to having such a unique look. She was adorable, and it was a great dress. And then there's, I think, another really interesting part to this, which is sourcing transparency. As artificial intelligence, and I can tell you that I also worked for an artificial intelligence company for a while, and drones and other technologies become create more visibility, we start to ask questions about supply chain. We start to wonder about things like labor trafficking, right? We start to wonder about the sustainability of what it is that we're sourcing, and we're going to have more and more of that ability to learn. And back to Devin's point, I'll be able to put on my augmented reality glasses, walk through any kind of retail environment and get a lot of product information that is interesting to me. May not be interesting to someone else, but I might really care about that, and that's going to become more and more visible and transparent if you're going to ask more questions. This is a site that you can go to and find out how many slaves are working on your behalf. You put in a quick profile of how many people are in your family and what are the things that you like to buy, and this is the information that gets spit back. It's humbling. It's eye-opening. So there's this real opportunity that leadership is about being better able to listen to the whole than anyone else, from Otto Scharmer at MIT. When you're able to step back and see the whole, you can start to see where the gaps are and where the opportunities are. You get to fill them in a way that when you're siloed and you're sitting there looking straight down, you don't always get to see. So I would argue that, again, the lesson from that is that we need to contribute versus extract. And I will, again, purport that the companies on the left side of that big shift map have spent so much of their time extracting value and holding on to ROI, and much less thinking about how they create value and contribute. When you contribute, you innovate from a very different place. Innovation then doesn't become risky, it becomes purpose-driven. It is very exciting to innovate on the other side. So this idea of moving from contribution to extraction, I think, is a really important place. The last one, I think, is, again, a really important one. It's this idea of the human cloud. I was on a tech panel a year or so ago with the head of cloud computing from Microsoft, who was talking so much about the digital cloud and how it has enabled mobile, and it's enabling big data, and will be the driver for artificial intelligence, and all that would not be possible without the digital cloud. And I thought out loud, actually said it out loud to a room of people, what's the equivalent of the human cloud? What allows us to accelerate and keep up with this pace of technology? Right? What is it that is available to us to try and do that? And I would say a lot of it is about collaboration and being in connection with others. You start to see businesses that are built specifically to connect one another. So WeWork, if you guys haven't been to, is a co-working facility. They're all over the world now. I think they're the 6th largest private company. It's valued around $16 billion. Just in basically putting a place where people can work together, learn together, share resources, not feel like they're so alone. And they're moving now into also communal housing, calling We Live. Who knows, again, if that's going to take off and be quite as big, but they see a need, again, for people to be in community with one another. And it doesn't have to be that my whole business strategy is that, but what I love is that Olive Garden is now creating a community table in their restaurants and inviting people to come and sit with others and share try a new menu item, have a conversation, but it's these places that allow us to have clouds of support, clouds of community, to have, sort of increase our fabric of connectedness with one another that I think is critical. Because here's the deal, navigating this whole new terrain alone is overwhelming, if not excruciating. It's also really slow, right? It's hard to learn all the things you need to learn all by yourself. None of us will know it all. We have to be in systems where we're connected to one another, and being able to find places to do that, I think, are important. We also see, by the way, a rising, unfortunately, correlated to this sense of mental health and overwhelm. So people are also feeling very isolated and feeling alone. So the more that we can reach out, again, as members of society and create places where people can connect with one another, the more successful we make a society. All right, so what does this mean? As we sort of sit in this, the pressure between all the cultural and economic shifts on one end and all these giant technological disruptions that are emerging as we speak, how do we navigate our way forward? Well, Whitney Johnson wrote a book called Disrupt Yourself, and I would say whether you read the book or not, it's really about being in that space where you're willing to change who you are and to grow in a way that you might not have before. It's okay to say, I don't know. It's really important to say, I don't know, right? There are so many things that we've been taught about how we're supposed to do things that maybe it's about the fact that we have to learn to do it differently. If you're really interested in this work, Carol Dweck has written a lot about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. We all need to be in a growth mindset. So that's just, to me, this is a point of leadering versus leadership. I won't go into a lot of it right now, but I think that we assume that leadership is something someone else is supposed to do, and we can just reap the benefits of it. And the fact is we are all leaders. Every single one of us are making decisions every day about whether or not we turn left or right. You can cheer at that. Yes. We're also, increasingly empowering our teams to be able to make decisions. We're collaborating with product suppliers, logistics partners in ways that we might not have before. We're collaborating with our customers in new and different ways. Leadering is an activeness in sort of defining the future, not just waiting for it to happen. So finally, how will we get there? Again, I go back to these two questions, right? What does the future need and expect from us? Hopefully, looking at these big shifts as we just looked at them helps us get a sense of what the future needs, right? I need to address a bipolar economy. I need to think about the whole. I need to form really collaborative relationships and more cooperative networks. I need to think about how to, contribute, not just extract. And I need to think about how to be in community. And so what are we in a position to create and contribute to that? This is my, again, invitation to play big, right? It's to wonder versus resist. It's to contribute versus extract. It's to navigate and innovate versus replicate and just think about scale. It's about being connected versus alone and fostering that, not just for yourself, but for others. And it's about being active in the work of leadering versus sort of abdicating to leadership. Because as Marianne Williamson has once stated, and I read this in my early 30s, and man, it changed the way I looked at the world, which is that your playing small does not serve the world. We are here to play big, right? So thank you for playing big, my new friends, and for using all you have and all you are to build a big, bright future for us all, and for the youth, by the way, that are watching you and that are part of this future that we are creating all together. Thank you very, very much.